It's the middle of October 2020. We are in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic that's been with us for the past 8 months here in the United States. The last great pandemic was in 1918-1919, dubbed the Spanish flu, or the 1918 influenza. There are lessons we could learn by looking back at history for how best to navigate where we are today. I'm Ron Fricker. I'm a professor of statistics, and I'm also the Senior Associate Dean in the College of Science at Virginia Tech. With my colleague, Tom Ewing, a professor of history here at Virginia Tech, and Steve Rigdon, who's a professor of statistics at St. Louis University, we went back and looked at the history of the 1918 influenza and tried to draw parallels to what we're experiencing today here in the United States. As you may know, the 1918 influenza, the Spanish flu as it's commonly called, proceeded through really 3 waves. It started in March of 1918, really very small, and spread mostly among military facilities and actually went over into Europe. And I think that's hence where the name came from. The key thing to know is that that was a small outbreak, if you will. And in fact, by late summer, many were saying that in fact the outbreak was over. However, it came roaring back in October. Between October and December, the highest death tolls occurred across the United States. And then it continued into 1919, where there was a 3rd wave, sort of in the late winter, early spring. In total, there were somewhere around 650,000 Americans who died from that particular pandemic. In 1918, one of the tools that was used to fight the influenza pandemic was masks, just like today. As you see in these pictures, they were worn in both public and private spaces to try to stem the spread of influenza. Then as now, they were equally controversial, with some refusing to wear masks for various reasons. However, then as now, it still does remain one of the key tools. And in spite of all our medical advances in the last 100 years, we still need masks today. This graph illustrates how significant the impact was of the 1918 pandemic. What you see here are 3 lines illustrating over time tuberculosis rates, pneumonia rates, and influenza rates. And these are deaths per 100,000 people in the population. And you can see that from 1913 to 1917, all 3 are roughly flat, meaning they stayed the same from year to year. And yet from 1917 to 1918, the rate of influenza just jumped up from down very close to 0 for deaths per 100,000, all the way up to 500 deaths per 100,000. So a dramatic increase. Key lessons learned from the 1918 pandemic are, first of all, to be vigilant. So in the first wave, authorities in 1918 were very quick to say the pandemic had passed, to ease social distancing measures and mask wearing measures, only to have the pandemic come back in much stronger waves in the fall of 1918 and then in 1919. We would do well to keep that in mind now as we're entering the fall period, and we should be very cautious about avoiding conditions that would lead to a large second wave. Of course, we're already observing significant increases, and that leads to the second point, which is in 1918, the pandemic started in metropolitan areas, only slowly spread to rural areas, but spread it did. We are seeing that same sort of phenomena occur now, where it started in the Northeast and in the West, in metropolitan areas, but today it's in the Midwest, in the rural areas. The final thing we should learn is that, in fact, basic public health measures are important. As the poster shows here, covering your mouth when you sneeze, wearing a mask, social distancing, those are all key critical public health measures that do help mitigate the impact of the pandemic. And until we have a vaccine, those are our critical key measures to mitigate this pandemic. If I can leave you with one final thought, it's this. This pandemic is not going away just because we wish it goes away. We all need to do our part. For now, that includes wearing masks, washing hands, and practicing social distancing and any other public health guidelines that are out there. Eventually, we'll have a vaccine, and then we all need to take the vaccine. If there's a lesson from 1918 is that this pandemic could be a lot worse, but we all have the ability to take actions, and in so doing, we can make this pandemic go away. Thank you for watching this video.